More activity the past few months? Yesterday was the first time I had to actually sage my house with incense, as I do not have any access to actual sage, as I saw a huge shadow figure in my hallway. No one was home. My mom was on a walk, and much smaller than the figure, and my cat outside sleeping. I was actually taking a video to send to my cousins when I saw it and caught my reaction. Will not be posting as there's no evidence on the video itself. Later that night, I saw a billowing cloud around my chair that I was sitting in. Very small. I suspect my cat that passed away in January, as even when he was alive, I called him my guardian angel. The final thing was that my basement stairs creaked as if someone was walking down. The house was quite new, about 20 years old. No deaths. The stairs never creaked like that unless someone is physically walking down them. I know the difference between someone walking down them and the house shifting. Been living in this house for about 15 years. My friends who live in the same state as I, but hours away from each other, have all been messaging me lately, saying that the paranormal activity they've experienced for years has increased tremendously over the past 3 months. One friend said she had something really negative in her house, so she used sage, and 2 days later found things that had been missing for a long time. Her spirits like to take and move things around. Has there been an increase in any other states, towns, or countries? If so, where? Does anyone know why this increase has been happening the past few months? Could it be because of the global pandemic? I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts. Pink Angel. My mother says I was always her most spiritual child. I was the only child for 5 years, and my mother was relatively young when she had me, 23, and my dad was 29. So I would play by myself constantly at my grandmother's house, either when my mom was home with her or if my mom was at work. That being said, I had one imaginary friend I would play with a lot, but only while at my grandmother's house. My mom thought nothing of it at first, and just one day decided to ask who I was playing with all the time. The pink lady, Mommy. Okay, yeah, that's a little weird. Kids are weird. They say weird stuff. My mom asked, The pink lady? I said, Yes, Mommy, she looks just like you. Oh, good. If I were my mother, I would have punted the little thing out the window. Curious now, my mom is asking for details. I say she looks just like my mother, but younger with long hair, and she always visits me in a pink dress. My mom asks, Where is she visiting from? I just point upwards and say, She comes from up there. This is where it gets a little weirder. My mom asks her mom, my grandmother, whose house we are in, and the only place the pink lady and I play together, what the fuck is wrong with me? My grandmother starts on about her older sister, my mom's great auntie Bernadette, my mother's namesake, who died around 15 or 16 years ago. While great aunt Bernadette was getting really sick and close to passing away, an angel dressed in pink came to her. She ended up telling my mother, so when she passed, my great aunt Bernadette was buried in a pink dress, who looks just like my mother with longer hair. I hope she's doing well. Everyone says what I experienced was sleep paralysis. To begin with, I'll say that I've experienced sleep paralysis before, and I know what that feels like. Little demon in the corner of my room and getting attacked by a burglar are 2 instances I can think of. Whenever I wake up and realize it's happening, I usually try to move, because that'll snap me out of that half-sleep state and stop any scary hallucinations from happening. However, The most jarring thing about it is how you can't move until you can. I was sleeping in my childhood bedroom while visiting my parents for the weekend, and in the middle of the night, my bedroom door opens. Now that's another aspect of this experience that does not add up for me. Our cat can open our bedroom door, which she only does when she wants to enter or leave. Because the door's latch is weak, she can actually push or pull the door open, and if she's pulling the door open, it makes a lot of noise with her scratching at the gap between the door and the floor. I went to sleep with my cat in my room, and I expected her to open the door at some point during the night to go to sleep in my parents' room. But when my bedroom door opened, it was quiet. Not like the cat had clawed it open, but like someone had opened it. Then I sat up, halfway in bed, looking at my open door, when the cat jumped into the bed. Why would she open the door just to come lay down next to me? I stared into the hallway, and it looked like someone's head was poking into my room. I thought it was my dad at first, as he worked early mornings and would come say goodbye, just while I was still asleep, giving me a kiss on the forehead. However, the person at the bedroom door didn't come in, like my dad usually would. They just stood there, tilting their head. I just kept looking, trying to figure out if or what I was seeing was real, or just a trick of my eyes. At this point, I was scared and laid back down, covering my head in the blankets. After a few minutes, I sat back up, and the figure in the doorway was gone. I mustered up the courage to get up and close my door again, and eventually went back to sleep. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but the cat didn't leave my room for the rest of the night. I told a bunch of my friends about this, and all of them said it must have just been sleep paralysis. But there are too many unanswered questions for me to chalk it up to that. Why would the cat open my bedroom door, then come back inside and lay down with me? That's out of character for her. Why wasn't it I woke up by the scratching if she did open the door? I'm a notoriously light sleeper. If the cat did open the door, what was the figure staring at me from the hallway? And if you like everyone I've told this story to, you probably think it is sleep paralysis. But let me say this. I have had sleep paralysis, and I know how it feels. I can't move when it happens. But when I finally am able to move, the hallucinations go away immediately. So how was I able to sit up in the bed and hallucinate some figure in my doorway for at least a minute after I sat up? Everyone says that this was an episode of sleep paralysis, but I can't get the image of the figure's head tilting at me like that, like it was assessing me somehow. Mysterious glowing and flashing green light on the wall in the dark. This happened in the last hour, so I'm still a bit nervous to turn my light off. I'm very confused about whether what I saw was real or simply an illusion. Feel free to explain in as much scientific detail as necessary. Here's a setup for the reference. A window with the shade drawn open is on the left wall at the end of my bed. Almost directly across from it is the open door to my closet. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when I finally gave up and I was looking around my dark bedroom. Note, I also have quite poor vision, so everything was blurry, even with my night eyes adjusted. I noticed out of the right corner of my eye a green light, a blur without my glasses, flashing at regular intervals, so I start to watch it. Over the next few minutes, it changes in various ways. It stops flashing, starts again, speeds up, stops twitching, starts twitching, and moving in freaky ways, disappearing, more pulsing down, it goes dim, irregular pulsing. I put my glasses on, and it reveals to be a solid dot, and I'm relatively uncomfortable by now, so I turn my lights on, and it disappears. I've ruled out all the obvious light sources, and I know I wasn't asleep. I can clarify any further if needed. Does anyone else think Slapped Ham on YouTube is a joke of a channel? Kalen and his crew are either idiots or just trolls. It's either or. Either they're dumb as hell or they're mocking those who believe in the supernatural. I'll give 3 examples. I recently saw a video in the Animals Being Derp sub about a month ago of a black dog just standing there still, as if he's in mid-stride. Even his tail wasn't moving. Just a funny, lighthearted video. For context, it was a Halloween video, and they were cut out of black cats in the human's front yard. Then there was hanging witch decorations in someone's front yard, tied between their roof and some tree. Kalen spouted, "It is some super eerie mystery." And there's orb vids all over the sub about the channel, and Kalen will comment with shit like, "Oh, spooky. It's just effing dust or bugs." Bonus mentions. In one video, there is a kid's cry able to be heard in some hallway in Mexico. As the guard walks through the stiles, it creaks. And he says in some super spooky sound, "Their thumbnails are edited." Like the video with the woman with the ostrich legs, knees bent backwards. She was a woman with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. She was simply double-jointed, and they altered her face to look almost like Anubis, or whoever the black god of cats is in Egypt. And just as you know, slapped ham isn't food, it's clapping cheeks. Look it up on Urban Dictionary. Motherly presence in my house. This is just a little experience I had about 2+ years ago. It was late at night, and for what I can tell, when I woke up suddenly, feeling completely awake, I wasn't sure why I'd woken up. But then I registered a presence next to me. I thought it was my mom checking up on me. You know the feeling when someone's near you, and sometimes you can feel their presence or know who they are? The presence I felt was exactly like my mom's, and she checked on me sometimes at night. I didn't feel a need to turn over or move or act like I'm anything but asleep, so I just lay there. Then I felt a finger or thumb softly press on my neck. Then the presence disappeared. No footsteps, no door opening or closing, no creaks down the stairs, nothing. I even sat up and looked around, but didn't see anyone. I didn't feel freaked out, but rather comforted, and lay down to try to fall back asleep again. When I slept, I had the strangest dreams out of my whole life to that point. To make a long story slightly shorter, in my dream, I was being pursued by a giant dark cloud. My mother, who was with me in the dream, knew about this and tried to help me get away from it. We went on a train, and I remember seeing the dark cloud following closely. When we exited the train, I was suddenly grabbed by a hand the cloud had formed and pulled me up into the sky. That was when I saw its face. Even though I'm an artist, I can't draw it. Its face was long, with hollow dark eyes, no nose, but rather visible nostril holes, and a long jagged mouth. The head shape didn't look human, but the proportions of the eyes, nose, and mouth were very human. It stared at me with its hollow eyes, then with a part of the cloud, reached into my chest and pulled out what I somehow knew was a piece of the dark cloud. I had somehow absorbed a part of it previously, and it wanted it back. That was all I knew and saw before I woke up. After that night, I began noticing humanoid gray figures in the house that both my mother and grandmother, who both don't fully believe in the paranormal, mentioned they'd seen the same thing in the exact same places I'd seen it. Without any reason, I decided the figure, who I knew was the same motherly presence I felt, was named Clarissa. I would feel her presence very often, but after several emotionally straining years, I've lost that sensitivity and haven't felt or seen her again. But deep down, I know she's still here and looking over my family. I don't believe in guardian angels, but her motherly presence makes me believe that she wants to look after my family as if they were her own. My experiences from when I was 11 to 12. I've always been a believer of the paranormal, that being ghosts, souls, and an afterlife. But I don't belong to any religion. From what I can remember of my childhood, I've had a few weird experiences, but none I remember as vividly as this one. I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, and my family had been living in Tasmania for about 2 or 3 years. My parents had started going through a rough patch in their marriage, which would eventually lead to their divorce. One night, when it was only me, my younger sibling, and my dad in the house, the beginning to a series of 3 events began. I had woken suddenly in the middle of the night, feeling completely awake, which was strange for me. I remember only being awake for less than a minute when I heard someone call my name. The voice sounded masculine, soft but loud, and the speaker sounded like they were talking through a metal pipe. It didn't sound natural, but I had just woken up, so it must be my brain making things up, I thought. Then I heard it again, sounding more sing-song this time. This time, I was terrified and hid under my blankets, as any kid would. I don't remember how much longer I was awake, but when I fell asleep, I had a vivid dream of a figure dressed in all black with a hoodie, standing at the bottom of the stairs outside of my room looking up at me. I remember how the next day, when my dad was awake, I asked him if he said my name during the night. Even though I knew it couldn't have been him, he said no, and said I probably just had a dream. But as ridiculous as it sounds, I know it wasn't a dream. That day, when I went to school, I told my friends about it, and one of them got really excited and told me a story about how one of her cousins was staying at her house over the weekend, and last night they had apparently seen a black hooded figure in their living room, which then disappeared after they saw it. I don't really believe this, but I thought it'd be interesting to add. The second time I saw a hooded figure was after a late night at my grandmother's house. My dad had driven me and my siblings home when I saw this person standing in my neighbor's driveway. I studied them for a few more seconds, but recognizing that they were the hooded figure I had seen in my dream, I told my dad and tried to get him to look. But he said he saw nothing and we should just go inside. The third time I had an encounter with the hooded figure was the scariest of them all. Once again, I was sleeping in my room when I suddenly woke up. I didn't feel tired again, but I wanted to go back to sleep, so I tried to move to a comfortable position. That was when I realized I was having my first sleep paralysis experience. At 12, I didn't know what that was and began panicking. At one point, I looked up at my wardrobe. My wardrobe's door were mirrors, and they reflected most of the room. In the reflection, I saw the hooded figure. It was looking through my shelves at the bottom of my bed. I was overcome with as much fear as a 12-year-old can feel and tried yelling for someone to help, but my lips were glued shut, and it felt like there was a tennis ball stuck in my throat. Despite not making any sound, I knew I was awake. I watched it stop moving, then snap its head back to look at me with inhuman speed. And before I could register its speed, it launched at me, grabbing my bed frame as if to jump onto my mattress. I blacked out. When I woke up again, it was light, but my vision was so blurry I could hardly see anything. But from what I could see, there was someone wearing black lying next to me. I reached my hand out to grab them and felt the softest fabric I'd ever held. My vision faded out again, and I woke fully a few minutes later. I've retold this story to a few of my friends, and over time I've started believing that Alex, the name I gave the hooded figure, was a sort of manifestation of my trauma and negative feelings I was going through at the time. Tasmania was a hellhole for me for multiple reasons that I won't get into. So I believe that rather than a random evil entity deciding to attach itself to me, my pain manifested itself into Alex. Since leaving Tasmania, I haven't seen him again, and I don't want to. So this happened in 2003. I was in class 3 in a school in Rawalpindi. The school had a newly built section where the classes were arranged on one side of a long corridor. At the end, there was a washroom with several cubicles. My class used to be on the second floor, so there was a window at the end of the corridor. Moreover, you could get a view of the surroundings from the windows inside the washroom, but they were mostly covered by old trees outside. Birds would often make their nests right above that window. Between the washroom and my class, there was one other class. The wall faces the class, and the washroom was plain, except for the stairs in the middle, which I took every morning to reach my class. Summer break was approaching, so the days got really hot. We used to have 8 periods, with a break in the middle. The day in question was a Friday, so we only had 2 more classes after break. We had social studies class right before break. The teacher was a strict old lady. I can still picture her face. My friend's name was Abdul Ahad. He has more like a blonde European than a Pakistani. With his white skin and golden hair, you wouldn't find a more innocent kid. Right at the beginning of the lecture, he asked teacher to go to the washroom. The teacher had a policy of not letting more than 1 student out of the class at a time, so when Ahad hadn't come back for some time, we began to get irritated. It wasn't until much later that the teacher realized that Ahad had gone out for some quiet time, and she wondered out loudly, "Where had he gone?" That's exactly when Ahad came back. None of us registered this at first, but he was positively shaken. Teacher threw some questions his way, but he ignored her. She wasn't someone you just want to ignore. Ahad simply came inside without even asking permission and sat up on his chair, hands down. We noticed this for a while, and then teacher asked him to come up to her. "What happened?" she asked him very politely, and he said with a straight face, "I was attacked by something." It was quite clear that he was very disturbed and struggling to comprehend. Teacher asked him to describe what happened, so he explained. He went to the washroom and entered the cubicle furthest from the door, right at the back, next to the windows. He had to shoo away a pigeon which was inside. Odd, because there wasn't any opening in the window. After getting rid of the bird, he sat down to business. Then right before getting up, everything went dark. He explained that he was standing in pitch black darkness for hours and he couldn't find his bearings. He said he was able to balance himself on the walls of the cubicle, tried to scream, but nothing came out of his mouth. As he began to get tired, he saw two eyes floating in the darkness. The eyes were a distinct shade of green, didn't do much except stare at him. This made him uneasy, and he tried to swipe at them in order to shoo them away. His hand flew right between those eyes, except whatever thing was watching him swiped back at him. He fell down unconscious, and when he woke up, he was lying in the corridor. So he just came back to class. He didn't remember coming out of the cubicle and into the corridor. At this point, the teacher sent him back to his desk, claiming that he was dehydrated and probably suffered a heat stroke, which was a reasonable explanation, except it didn't explain what we saw 15 minutes later in the break. Right as the break started, everyone rushed to Ahad to hear his story again. He told us the story again, but many of us agreed with the teacher, so he simply showed us something he hid from the teacher, a ripped portion of his shirt, which started from the elbow till the cuffs. Under the shirt, his skin bore a deep scar, which looked very painful, yet it wasn't bleeding. Only a few students still believed the teacher, saying he probably fell. One even claimed that he used a pen to cut himself. I was one of those who believed in the teacher. Nothing prepared us for what was waiting in the corridor, though. The wall in front of the washroom was ripped away by what appears to be a Hulk-sized wolverine. It left a claw-like mark, almost identical to the mark on Ahad's arm. The mark was basically 3 long lines, longest in the middle and shortest at the bottom. Ahad's arm had a scar, but the wall had a deep cut much bigger than the scar in Ahad's arm. Cement lay on the floor as though someone had swung at the wall with a hammer repeatedly, yet it was so clean it looked like it was made in one big swipe. It started near the ceiling and went all the way to the bottom. No human could have ripped it like that without alarming half of the school, because the wall was clean, as new, just that morning. Out of curiosity, some of us went to the washroom to check. Specifically, the cubicle Ahad had used. It was completely destroyed. The flush was broken, water spilling everywhere. The door was barely hanging on the hinges. No third grader could have done that, even when falling down on it. Ahad's encounter spread like wildfire, and pretty much the whole school knew before the break ended. The corridor was filled by students trying to see the claw marks on the wall. It wasn't like the movies where everyone would run off. We knew if something happened, it would happen to all of us, and somehow that made us feel safe. The principal himself had to come down to our corner of the school and dismiss everyone. We didn't come back to our class after break. Ahad's parents were informed. We wouldn't see him for weeks. The school stayed closed for Monday and Tuesday for repairs. When we came back, the trees behind the washroom were cleaned away. It's local belief that the supernatural being often lived on those old trees. I find that out after we had to cut some trees in our home. Needless to say, as much as I believe in science and stuff, I cannot explain or even comprehend that day. I think I died in my motorcycle crash. On August 28th, 2021, right after 12 a.m., I was in a horrible motorcycle crash. Things got blurry, but I think I was meant to die, or did. I ended up going to a big motorcycle event with some co-workers, as I worked in the industry of bikes then. Left the place, and it's in a city, a bit unfamiliar with the area. Some pretense leading up to this, I kept seeing the number 666 everywhere. Obviously, you say this to someone and you sound crazy. My best friend, let's call her Tay, was riding with me prior, and we saw multiple license plates, including a semi with the 3-digit plate, 666. Enough for her to be like, okay, that's weird. Well, back to that night. I was going home, feeling good, and enjoying my G310 after its first service. Things just went black. It's odd. 1 second you're here, and the next I was conscious, like a black void, more like a bubble. Felt like I was floating, almost like in water, but no resistance. I felt true peace. I could even put it into words. Imagine you have the best sleep ever, but times 1,000. I heard distant screams from a woman. Felt like time passed almost, but then sirens far. Then sirens and walkie-talkies closer, much closer. During this time, I had very little knowledge or couldn't talk. Just like what happened, but almost like I was a tiny child with no concept of the world or anything. All of a sudden, it feels like I was tied to a fucking A-10 jet by some really long string, and it flew over and ripped me back to life 1,000,000 miles an hour. The movies get it eerily right, put things together eventually, and they hit me with adrenaline in my thigh, caused a massive boil, like blood sac thing that popped in the hospital. Well, I broke my pelvis straight in half, and wrist. Before surgery, I was in and out of consciousness. The only dreams I could remember, I walked into this giant beautiful forest, but more like a garden. It was my ex there, naked in a huge hot spring. She was a bitch, but damn, she was hot. Except it wasn't her, and she had black eyes and a very not normal voice. It said to me, "You know who I am. Do you like how I look?" This was followed up by another dream where I entered the forest or garden again, and I remember it saying, "Welcome back." All this trips me out more because I was out of the hospital weeks later and trying to put things together. I found the intersection online, the pizza joint on Google Maps. Has it there with the sign with 666 in the phone number. The fucking intersection was 666. The area had some crazy satin Latin gang there. It just all blows my mind. The dreams messed me up, but then more after I put the pieces together. Add in seeing this number prior, also found a pic of my mileage, took one right before I left the event because I was at 1,111 miles. I might be cursed on the devil's hit list, or maybe he's bastard. Not exactly on my own, but I was part of the group. It was at a theater, summer camp, a few towns over. We rehearse a play and present it to the parents on the last day. And during the 2 weeks also, do things like bonfires, hikes, and even some street performances to train our confidence. We'd done some that day and went to a play, performed by another theater club in town, and as such, were exhausted, and it was already dark. We were told that we'd have to walk back to camp, and like the cranky teenagers we were, we protested, but there was no other way. We protested again when our leader told us we'd have to walk along fields using dirt paths that were not lit at all, or used by anything other than hikers and the occasional crazy biker. We called bullshit, but he insisted. I was and still am kind of scared of the dark, especially in rural areas, so I held onto the arm of a much older girl who was like my big sister during camp. Then I saw the hooded figure. It stood right in the middle of the field, to the left of us, unmoving, but clearly visible. I wasn't scared, but felt very safe in our group of people, and didn't say anything because I felt safer if the others weren't scared. Of course, someone else saw and pointed it out, at which point we all became scared. Our leader did his best to calm us, telling us it was probably just some weirdo on a walk. That calmed everyone down until the bush and trees on our right side subsided and revealed the field to our right. Two weirdos out on a walk in black robes, standing motionless in the middle of a field. At this point, we decided to walk faster, not keen on interrupting or participating in whatever weird ritual we'd stumbled into. A third field came into view, revealing yet another black figure. Some shone the flashlights we used to watch the ground at them, but they couldn't reach far enough, and the older kids told them to stop as not to provoke the hooded figures. We reached a house, still in the middle of nowhere. It was an old GDR building, a large block of concrete with some windows, and our leader told us to be extra quiet. He explained that there was a Slavic immigrant living there, similarly to these people in the US that claimed to not be a citizen or something. We were supposed to be quiet because they were known around the area to be, just say, cranky. The house was like their own community, and they really disliked outsiders. So we walked past it. No noise is heard besides the shuffling of our feet. We're a good while away when suddenly two girls at the back of the group scream, startling us. It was like a human stampede. I barely ran myself. I just held onto the other girl as I was swept up in the group, being pushed forward. When our leader finally got us to stop, he scolded the two girls and asked them why they screamed. I knew them. They were both tough as nails. One liked to climb trees, and they played in the dark woods regularly. They said they got scared because they heard a scream from right behind them. Even though they were the last ones, and the building we passed was far off in the distance, the one thing around us were fields and the path we had walked before. Needless to say, we were creeped the hell out and almost ran back to camp. Super glad when we finally arrived and could go inside. I was surprised the girl I held on to still had blood in her arm afterwards. Not the most paranormal story I know, but it was one of the scariest nights of my life. I still don't know what it was all about, but I still remember it vividly, even though it was like 8 years ago. I worked as a nurse in an old person home where we had this lady who never ate or drank but lived forever. She spoke multiple languages and talked weird, always laughed, and other people mostly came out crying. Once entered, and she told me who I was and talked bad about people I cared about. Also heard the occasional moments where she bit people in the arms, hands, and neck if you came too close. When talking about religion, she laughed. It was always cold in the room, and the door would close by, I don't know, some reason every time you entered. Let me tell you that these doors are heavy. Everyone believed that there was more at work here, but higher-ups never believed in the paranormal. I stopped working there, but I heard from someone she died. Also, her neighbor never liked living there either. After the weird woman died, her neighbor quickly followed too. And after that, the two came to live after them also died 1 week after getting there. Never spoke again with anyone working there. Fuck that place. Scariest thing ever. Also posted this as a reaction on a post somewhere in this group. I just thought I would post it individually. Update. So I saw people commenting it's fake. It's from a show, all that. I personally never watched that kind of stuff on Netflix, so I don't know, but I will definitely check it out. After I wrote this story, I tried to contact my friend again that worked at the same place. He told me that he did not want to talk about it. Told me he was in therapy and still is, but just not about this. He also told me he finally found a house to live in and is about to bring their second child into this world. Levitating by the spiral staircase. All this happened when I was 25. I was around 5 or 6 years old, and I remember everything like it was yesterday. Because I've been thinking about that day often, and I've talked to multiple people about it throughout my life. It was my mom's birthday, and she invited some of her friends to have a lively party at our house. Most of the people with children were my parents' friends, though, my older sister's school, so most of the kids were older and didn't want to hang out with me. I, on my part, never really liked hanging out with other children, so I was more than happy to stay behind the spiral staircase, drawing on the floor with my crayons. At a certain point, I got up to stretch my legs, holding myself with one hand on the side of the wooden staircase, when the legs started coming up on their own. I found myself hovering in midair, about 2 or 3 feet above the ground, in an almost sitting position. I just lightly holding onto the wood railing to anchor myself. I say sitting to describe the position, but it felt completely free and floaty, very reminiscent of the sensation of weightlessness. Some say very light turbulence or roller coasters, but this lasted for about 30 or 60 seconds. Not sure, as if it was super quick, but it didn't last long. The experience filled me with glee at the time, and I gently pushed my legs down, one at a time, and ran to my parents, dragging them to the staircase and yelling, "Come, come, please, you have to see this," while giggling. I then proceeded to grab the staircase and joyously lift my legs, proud and excited, but they dropped down immediately. I tried to prop them up, a bit confused, to no avail. I tried jumping, helping myself with my arm, and going slowly, one leg at a time, but nothing happened. My parents eventually grew tired, not understanding that I was trying to show them, and left me because I spent the rest of the night frustrated by the staircase, hanging by the railing, climbing in between the steps, anything just to trigger it again. It never happened to me again. Nothing of the sort had ever happened to me since, but it changed my perspective on life. How can I be a person who believes that reason, rather than experience, is the foundation of certainty in knowledge when I myself have experienced something that I cannot explain with reason? That's not to say that I'm not a skeptic, as I've talked to multiple people about this, including friends, family, and a therapist, to see if I might be having hallucinations, but he didn't believe so, as I've never had one other than that, and I wasn't under any particular amount of stress at that time. As I got older, I even tried to go to the gym and try to recreate the position, but I never could. Sometimes children have freaky strength, but I was literally just lightly holding onto the staircase, and there was nothing else to help. My parents and sister do remember me mentioning this, but they all remember about the night as me being very grumpy and fussy by the spiral staircase. A girl walked through walls. It all started in 2011, when I was 10 and my older sister was 14. We were playing in our childhood home, running through the house and horseplaying, when we noticed this girl who appeared to be around 12 years old and was dressed in a blue and white dress with long blonde hair. She looked to be from the 1930s or 1940s. We were the type of kids who believed in the paranormal and things like that, so we weren't that scared. The only one home at the time were our parents and us. There were no other kids at our house. We stopped and looked at her, then each other, trying to think of a way to make sense of what we were seeing. A girl, and we shouldn't be seeing. The girl was just standing in the middle of the room, looking around at everything. We both said at the same time, "Hey, who are you?" She didn't say anything. She just walked through the wall. We both jumped and immediately went back to the other side of the wall, which happened to be my older sister's room at the time. And she was gone and nowhere to be found. We go to our parents and tell them about what we had just seen, and of course, they don't believe us. Over the next couple of weeks, we tried to think why they saw the girl and why she appeared to walk through the wall. We couldn't think of a reason why we saw her, so we decided to look up stuff about our house. We found out that there was a fire at a mental hospital in 1952 that took the lives of 17 people. We believe that the girl we saw was one of the victims of that fire, and it was trying to find a way to safety. Now we're 21 and 26 and still don't know who or why we saw the girl. Weird experiences I had in my old house. For context, I'm a 19-year-old male, and my family moved into my old house in North-South Wales, Australia, around the time I turned 5 years old. We lived there for about 13 years and moved out a few months ago. Since before even moving into that house, I would see and hear weird stuff that would range everything from going quiet and hearing a disembodied male voice calling my name from over the fence in our backyard at the time, to running to my parents' room after having a nightmare to see tendril-like shadows thrashing around the room above my younger brother's cot that gave me an overwhelming feeling of fear and sickness before passing out and walking up to my parents, freaking out over finding me passed out on the floor outside the room the next morning. Most of that stuff is easily explained by me being a dumbass kid who had sneakily watched too many freaky shows my dad would watch at the time without him knowing, and developing an overactive imagination and irrational fears. However, a little while after moving into the house this is all about, I'll begin to have reoccurring night terrors every week. In said dreams, I would wake up lying on my stomach in front of the cupboard door in my room, with the door slightly open, just enough that I could see the glow from the static you'd get on those old TV box sets, which we had on our PlayStation 2 hooked up to that cupboard sitting on a sort of table. In the dreams, I couldn't move at all, not like how in sleep paralysis, where you feel paralyzed, more like I felt an immense weight on my back that I couldn't push off. Not that I really tried because I was too scared to move, but I could feel something holding me there. I would begin to hear this female voice repeating something, which I cannot remember. The voice slowly got deeper and deeper, more and more angry. Even eventually I'd just wake up, lying in the same spot in real life. Cupboard door still cracked open. No glow from the TV though. Obviously, I'd sprint down the hallway to my parents' room, where I'd practically leap into their bed, feeling like something was chasing me. My parents chalked it up to me being a kid and having an overactive imagination. They all know I had. They are also very ignorant when it comes to malevolent spirits or anything paranormal to this day, despite believing in Christianity. These dreams happened every week for 5 weeks until they stopped. After a while, not sure how long I'd begun to forget about the dreams, until one night, I once again woke up on the floor in front of the cupboard, door cracked open with the faint glow of the staticky TV. Only this time, there was no voice, just pure silence. All of a sudden, the weight on my back turned into a pull on my legs, which dragged me at a fucking Mach 10 down the hallway, through the garage door and through a manhole into the attic, and across the floor to the attic to a box where I could make out a small piece of paper sitting on it with something written on it. And then I woke up in my bed, scared, but not feeling like anything else was there. So I went back to sleep after laying there, shitting bricks for a while. Fast forward like 10 years, and I asked my parents if they remember me having these dreams. Turns out I never mentioned the last one to them, because apparently my dad had gone up into the attic about a year ago to check for rats because we kept hearing scratching on the ceiling, and he found a single fucking envelope with a woman's name on it, which he can't remember. I asked what he did with it, and he said he threw it out because it didn't seem important and he felt wrong about opening in an envelope that was addressed to somebody else. Fast forward another year and a half, about a year before we moved in. One night, really late, it's 2 or 3 a.m., I'm chilling in my room, different from the one where I had the dreams, slightly further down the hall, closer to my parents, and more importantly, the bathroom, watching videos on my phone. But at this point, my brother and I had really fucked our sleep schedules, so he was taking a shower and brushing his teeth in the bathroom before he went to bed, when I hear this loud fucking bang. Wondering what the fuck he's doing, I go and open the door, and he steps out and nearly shits himself when he sees me. I can tell that he's scared and freaking out, so I asked him, what the fuck is going on, and what was that bang? He tells me he saw a face coming out of the wall behind him in the mirror, and being my brother, punches the mirror, which makes it disappear. I was skeptical, thinking my brother might be tripping or something, or he just imagined it due to being sleep deprived. So I went and checked the bathroom, which he refuses to go to, and found nothing. A few months later, my ex and I are chilling on the couch in the living room, and once again, we hear a bang. So again, I go check and see my brother standing in the bathroom, staring at the mirror, unblinking, his hands shaking. Ask him what the fuck is happening. He walks out and answers, I saw it fucking again. What? The fucking face on the wall. We all say fuck that and leave. Hear what sounds what I presume was plastic coat hangers moving around in the bathroom. Then after building up the balls to go back and see what we could find, we find this drawing on the window in the condensation. When I tried to wipe it off with my hand, I realized it was drawn on the side of the window that is between the fly screens and the slide we were on. There was no way anybody could have drawn that without taking the fly screen off. After all this, and years of other smaller things, I decided I want to know what the fuck is going on and stayed up all night with my ex and brother researching the house. Ending up finding out a young woman went missing in the area a while back. I also checked back lease records on the house and found that someone had moved in and out of the house within 2 months, during which the woman had gone missing. So my theory is that some sicko kidnapped and murdered this poor woman, and she was trying to reach out to us, telling me that the voice I heard in my dreams was hers. If anyone could tell me their opinion on what was happening, that would be great, as I feel like my theory is based off a lot more conjecture than actual evidence. Thanks in advance. A lot of other weird stuff has happened in and around that house. 2 quick examples. A friend of my brother's took a video of a weird undulating cube flying above a clearing in the bush next to the house, which came closer to him before flying off. I heard something screech and what sounded like an entire fucking tree snapping in half in the bush next to the playground at midnight. After leaving it because I felt like I was being watched, proceeded to skate home fast as fuck. If anyone cares enough to elaborate on some of these other things. Strange mind. Let's start this out by saying I've seen things. All the time I do. It's not uncommon, and most of the time I shrug it off. I have GAD, Generalized Anxiety Disorder. I feel emotions a lot heavier than other people do, who don't have it. It can mean I cry for no reason, get angry at nothing, and even laugh at a speck of dust. I overthink every detail about my day many times. However, one big thing that goes along with this is that my mind never shuts off. I hear voices that aren't there and so on. I see figures who my brain pretends exist. So that's why I often, as I said before, shrug it off. However, this time was different, very different. It was a few weeks ago. I was home alone, my parents were at work, and I didn't have work, so I just crashed there after school. This isn't uncommon. I do it often. I'm a female and only 18, so I do what any smart gal would do. Locked up all the doors because people are crazy. I got a call from my parents saying that they were going to go for a bar for a while. Fine by me, I meant I could read a book and enjoy the peace and quiet for longer. It was around 7 and it was dark outside. The moon gave the yard some light. I read my book for about an hour now, it being 8:25. I checked my phone to see if I had any messages, so this time I know precisely. I heard a sound from the kitchen. My head snapped over. Thinking my parents had gotten home, I didn't hear them enter, but again, I was lost in my book. Hello? No one. Okay. Odd. It's my brain playing tricks. I do have a strange mind. But no, there it was again. It was a drawn-out noise. I couldn't make it out. It gave me goosebumps. But again, my mind plays tricks. I should just go check it out and calm my nerves. I walked into the kitchen and stopped, dead in my tracks. 2 of the drawers were open. They shouldn't be. I haven't eaten yet, so I've not even walked into the kitchen. So why were the spoons and forks and knives open? Mom, you there? It was fear. I was getting scared. I felt a panic attack coming. It just wasn't right. I like things being perfect. It helps me calm down. So when it isn't, I get iffy. I took deep breaths and closed the drawers. Could have been me forgetting things. The wood being loose and causing them to slide out. Then I heard a knock on the door. Okay, good. Parents are home. They'll understand. They always do. I go back to the living room and go to unlock the door, but it was already unlocked. I let my hand just hover there. I locked that door. I knew I locked that door. I checked 3 times, peeked at it 5 times, just to make sure it was locked. I heard a knock again. It shook me into a slight panic. Sorry, I called out to them and opened the door. No one. There was no one out there. I looked around outside. Their car wasn't here. I quickly closed and locked the door again, stepping back. Okay, so this isn't my strange mind. That door was locked, and I knew I heard a knock. Panic. I was having a panic attack. I didn't take much to make me have one. I ran into the room, closed my door. I stayed there until my parents got home, and admittedly, I slept on the floor that night. Nothing else has happened since I opened the door, but again, I haven't stayed home alone. I took more shifts at work and refused to be there without someone. Was it my GAD? Was it my mind? Was it something else? Does anyone else have a similar experience? Once, back in the 90s, my dad's car broke down in the middle of the night. He was alone and on a back road with not a lot going on. As it happens, he broke down right near a house. It was a bit dilapidated looking, but whatever. He needed to call someone to pick him up. He walked over, knocked on a door, and an older lady answered. She was sweet and let him use the phone to call his dad. He got picked up by his dad, and the next morning, they came to tow the car. There was no house anymore, or any sign of it. As a child, I had an imaginary friend named DC. I can picture it in my head, now as an adult, what he looked like. He was a boy covered in soot. I was attached to him, and kind of weird about it. My mom would call me to dinner and say something like, DC says I'm not allowed to eat now. My parents could also hear me playing and talking to him, completely acting as if he were responding to me. A bit of time passed and I stopped mentioning him or playing with him. When my parents asked what happened, I told them he died in a fire. A couple years back, I had a snow globe in my room. It was on a bookshelf across from my bed. I was laying in bed one night, trying to fall asleep, when I heard the snow globe winding itself up. I opened my eyes and looked in that direction, but saw nothing, and assumed I had started to fall asleep, and maybe it was a dream. As soon as I laid my head back down and closed my eyes, the snow globe started winding itself up again, for longer this time. I immediately got up and took the snow globe down to the basement. Years ago, my dad used a Ouija board alone. He placed his hands on the plankette, asked a question, and it started to move. The plankette moved more and more aggressively, and my dad decided to stop and take his hands off. The plankette then was in its last 4 figure eights around the board until eventually flying off. My mom also used a Ouija board with some friends years ago without my dad, and when they were done, they placed the Ouija board on a dresser. Not long after, the board flew off and hit a wall. I've seen shadows out of the corner of my eye. I've smelled perfume that my deceased great-grandmother used to wear. I've seen drinking glasses move themselves. I've had items mysteriously disappear, then reappear days later in the spot I'd last left them. I've heard people walking downstairs when I know everyone is in their bedroom upstairs. And I've woken up twice now in the middle of the night to people in my bedroom. This last one, I am not willing to admit, may be explainable away as a dream while being half awake. I have no doubt in my mind, in some form or another, ghosts are real. The first one happened back in '95, when I was about 5 years old. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes, and would hear what sounded like my mom calling my name from downstairs. So I'd go to look, and it'd be completely pitch black downstairs, and I'd never cross the doorway into the living room, because I knew that no one would just be sitting in the dark. It went on for a week or so, until the last time it happened. It sounded like my mom calling my name from the kitchen, so I went downstairs to see if she was up, and made the mistake of rounding the corner too fast, and crossed the doorway into the kitchen. All of a sudden, this super tall shadow just started running at me from the far side of the kitchen. 5-year-old me just turned around without making a noise and bolted back upstairs, jumped in bed, pulled the covers up over me, thinking that I had just been chased by the boogeyman. The second happened in 2008 when I was 18. It was my senior year of high school, and the day before seniors started. I had woken up while my mom and little sister were getting ready to drop my sis off at school, so I had laid back down to try to sleep in some more. I heard someone leave out the front door, so I figured that mom had went out to get the car warmed up, and my sister was still in the house. All of a sudden, I hear my bedroom knob start jiggling like someone was trying to open it, and thought, oh, that was my sister trying to scare me. So made it look like I was asleep by closing my eyes a little. The door opened, but instead of my sis, it was a shadow person with iridescent blue eyes, starting to glide into my room. This thing blocked out the light from the bathroom, but didn't cast a shadow on my door. I was so surprised that I opened my eyes as wide as possible, and the shadow person was also surprised because it did the same thing. Then it just slowly backed out of my room and closed the door. I jumped up in a bit of a panic, thinking that someone had broken into the apartment and searched the whole house. But it was only my dad who was asleep, and myself. The third story happened back in 2018. A few days after my dad passed away, I was the only one at home and was in my room playing video games when I hear the front door unlock and open. Someone walked in, closed the door, and locked it. Thinking that it was my mom coming in, I hollered, "Hello?" Nothing, just silence. So I said hello again, kinda nervously. Still no answer. So I get up and walk down the hallway, still saying hello, expecting to see someone. There was no one. I was still at the house alone. Told my mom after she was done with the funeral arrangements, and she said that it was my dad's spirit coming back to the house. I'm pretty skeptical about paranormal stuff, but I know what I've seen and heard. I got a couple other stories, but I just chalked them up to sleep paralysis or overactive imagination. I've been experiencing something since I was a child. I will start with some key details of my experiences that has started since I was a child. I remember experiencing a horrific dream to the point of night terrors since I was a kid to even now as an adult. There's always the same type of creature or beast-like creature in my dreams when these events happen. The dreams seem to have gotten worse over time, where I actually jump, shaking, sweating, breathing, screaming, or even grabbing objects in my arms and throwing them. I have had some experiences throughout life that have been unexplained as well. That didn't happen when I was sleeping. Electronics turning off and on randomly, microwaves, ovens, TVs, coffee pots. I have had lights turn on when I remember never turning them on. I have had your typical shadows or movements in the corner of my eye as well throughout my whole life. Where things are really interesting is there's a few events that I can't explain. There's others, but these are some major ones and recent ones. First one was my experience I had in my studio where all the cupboards, doors were open. The kitchen and bathroom light was on, and I was barely laying in bed. I had a dream where I was floating in my sleep and the lights were flashing off and on. The cupboards were slamming open and closed. When I finally woke up, I was freezing cold. I could basically see my breath, which doesn't make sense because it was a summer night in July. The other thing is my ex-wife refused to talk about that night. The other events are kind of connected, but anyways, my fiance is a semi-practicing witch, and I started joking, started mentioning some of the stuff I experienced over my lifetime, and that I am still a skeptic. The issue is, as this happened, my night terrors started becoming way more frequent, and I started hearing things she couldn't hear, and seeing things in the corner of my eye. She insisted we get something called a dream potion, which you're supposed to take the cap off when you sleep for protection, and asked me to use it every day that I remember when I sleep. When I got the potion, there was 3 sizes. I said, well, clearly we need the biggest one, especially because I've been haunted by this since I was a child. So when we first got it, I didn't take the cap off of it because I didn't want my dream thoughts to kind of take it and run with it. Hope that makes sense. Within the first week after I passively forgot about it, I had a visit from this creature in my dream, but it was different. It was asking me to get rid of the dream potion because it couldn't do anything with it around. Mind you, this was with the cap still on, and I jokingly said something to the fiancé, and she jokingly said, well, it clearly works then, even with the cap on. Fast forward a little bit ahead in time, I was getting out of the shower, and my fiancé asked, what the hell did I do to my back? I asked her what she was talking about, and I looked at my back in the mirror and I had scratches across it, like I was scratched by something, which is weird because I don't remember scratching my back on anything, and it looked semi-fresh. And she thinks it could possibly be from the visitor, or I did it by accident and I don't remember. The most recent event was a little while ago. My fiancée had been trying to search for this creature in her sleep to get an idea of what it is, so she knows how to handle it. She told me that she thinks she found it finally. It wouldn't talk to her, but she could see it. I asked her to describe it to me. She proceeded to explain from what she could remember. She explained it almost exactly what I've been seeing since a child. The key thing is I have not once explained what I would see awake or asleep to anyone. I admitted that's basically what I see or what it looks like. So now I've been sleeping with the cap off and with the potion to see if it will visit since this has happened. The visitor came back a few times, a lot more reserved this time, and said that my fiancée needs to mind her own business, essentially. I haven't told her this part yet because I've been busy and I'm starting to question my skepticism regarding the paranormal. Whispering in the woods. We camped in the area of Cane Creek, Kentucky, near Laurel Lake. Me and my friend camped down on his property in literal BFE. No service, no noise, no anything, but you in the woods. We set up our tent under an overhang, and when I was tasked with gathering firewood, it was about 5 p.m. or so. While collecting, I got an odd feeling and start hearing whispers. They weren't saying anything. It was just murmuring. Couldn't make anything out. At that point, I get a creepy, odd feeling and move closer to our camp to collect firewood, not straying anymore after that. Night progresses and nothing out of the ordinary happens until we climb into our bags. I heard footsteps in the leaves and more murmurs. I was getting genuinely freaked out, but I know the best thing to do is ignore it and sleep. I did. And the following morning, me and my friend found ourselves awake at 5 a.m. He asked me if I heard whispering at night. I told him I heard it twice. We were both equally baffled. Clarification: we were not the first people in this camp in this area. His uncle and his friends attempted to camp there, but couldn't make it through the night. My dad is a hunter, and he refuses to go down there anymore. As another friend and I have, his dad says that the air down there is rich in death. We have also found arrowheads on the property. What it means? No idea. Any ideas here? This is the first time I've ever encountered anything like this in my camping adventures. What he seen before he passed. My grandmother's house has always been very active, especially when death was near. There was a shadow that would go down the hallway and play peekaboo with her when she would sit and read her book before bed. When she passed away, the house quieted down, then picked back up again. One night my mother was laying in what was my grandmother's room and heard a loud crash. Thinking it was the cat knocking something over, she told my stepdad not to worry about it, and they would clean it up in the morning. When they woke up, they found my grandmother's Virgin Mary laying on the floor across the room from where it should have been. The porcelain statue was fully intact, minus the itty-bitty piece of petal from the bottom of the rose petals she was holding. I do think this is because my grandmother didn't like my stepdad very much, and even in death, she wanted that known. When my step-grandfather was near passing, there was a small tower of coins standing on my stepdad's dresser. This wasn't a perfect straight up and down stack of quarters. The coins were on the very edge of each other. I'm not sure a person could do it, even if they had steady enough hands, but none of us in the house would have been able to do that. My mom was the one that found it, and it stayed standing long enough for all of us to get a good look at it. Mom was super impressed that one of us could do that in just a few minutes, but it wasn't us. After getting a look at it, they fell straight down. All of us got this icy chill. My step-grandfather passed away just days later. Now, what you all have been waiting for. My stepdad was sadly diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and passed almost 5 years ago. Before he passed away, he was tormented a little. Toothpaste tube would slide across the bathroom counter, full bottles of shampoo would fall over, and he would see things. The things he told us scared the daylights out of me. He got out of bed one night to go to the kitchen and was greeted at the bedroom door by a solid dark shadow person. He froze and frantically called for my mother. She finally woke up and was confused to why her badass ex-boxer of a husband was shaking like a leaf. He calmed down and went back to bed, just to be woken up by other things the next few nights. One thing was a little demon sitting on the floor looking at him when he rolled over to my mother. She looked like a burnt mummy. I giggled at that part because my mom took it as an insult. About a month before he passed, my little sister and mom were sitting on bed with him, and he was staring at something. Eve asked him what he was looking at, because it was in her direction. He told her, "He's looking at me." She looked at him and said, "Who?" He went on to tell her that there's a shadowy person sitting right behind her. Mom said she never ever saw Eve move so fast. The day of his passing, I was in Florida, about to make a drive to Tennessee with my other sister, Nicole. Before I woke up to get ready for the drive, Dad came to me in my sleep. He hugged me and told me, "Everything is going to be okay." I woke up in tears and told Nicole something was wrong. 2 hours into our trip, Mom calls. "He's taking a nosedive." The car ride was so quiet. Long, not a word was muttered. When I get back from Tennessee, my husband and I make a beeline for Mississippi to see my stepdad one last time before he gets cremated. I guess he had heard me ask my mom if I could have some of his ashes, and she told me no. I got those ashes. He didn't fit in the urn that my stepmother's best friend got for him. Now he's sitting in my living room next to a huge chunk of amethyst. The ghost likes Christmas lights. So my husband and I bought some small LED Christmas lights from Walmart and hung them on the top of our wooden headboard a few nights ago. I usually keep them on throughout the night until we officially are ready to close our eyes and sleep. Well, both of us got up a few hours ago to grab some food. We have just been hanging out in the pitch black, cuddling, or watching videos on our phones. Well, my husband was lying on his side, facing our sliding glass door to the porch, and I was lying on my back, listening to a sleep meditation with my eyes open. Suddenly, the Christmas lights turn on. At first, I didn't realize what was going on, but then I told my husband to look and explain that I didn't touch them and that they are battery operated, with a soft plastic button you have to push in order to turn them on. I grabbed the cord to see where it led, and the battery case and button is set nicely on the shelf located on my side of the headboard, all by itself. Needless to say, I'm thoroughly creeped out, and so is my very masculine, not easily intimidated husband. Backstory. The real estate agent that helped our family find this house informed my mother-in-law that the couple that lived here before us would get all the cops called on them, all the time, for domestic disputes and noise complaints and welfare checks. The neighbors would hear them scream and yell and act completely hateful and almost homicidal to one another. The month that the couple split up, as far as I've been told, and moved out of the house, the husband, whom was alleged as the primary aggressor, took his own life. No one other than my family has lived here since, but everyone that lives here, and some who don't, have either experienced something bizarre, noted some kind of dark energy, mood swings, anxiety, seen things move or turn on by themselves. I'm not saying for sure, but the previous couple and the undeniable bad aura surrounding this house are related, but based off of my own experience in the past year of living here, it's too coincidental for my liking. My husband and I are newly married, 10/24/22, and I'm also 6 months pregnant. But we have known each other since we were 12 and 13. I'm 26 and he's 27. We have had our differences and have obviously gotten on each other's nerves before we lived here. But since moving in, we have become different at times. The way we fight has changed completely, and it's scary. I'll spare the minor details of that for now, but I have never seen or heard my husband or myself behave in ways that we have towards each other before this. Some of that, I believe, is due to stress, but we have become aggressive, hateful, irrational, and impulsive, just clouded with anger for no reason sometimes. I genuinely think whatever is turning my Christmas lights on is causing my recurring nightmares, making me and the man I love behave like barbarians, and maybe adding to the cause of my prenatal depression. Help me. Any advice is welcome.